Is that supposed to be food, or are you trying to attract a mate? The voice behind me was warm, edged with amusement, and it made me whip around so fast I nearly dropped the banana I'd been gnawing on. The outpost corridor was dim, flickering with overhead lights that hadn't been serviced in years, but it was enough to make out the figure leaning against a battered metal wall. Her silhouette was all smooth curves and strange ridges, with faint lines of luminescence pulsing across her arms. She was taller than me by a good half a foot, too, which never failed to unsettle me. I swallowed the chunk of banana hard and tried to keep my heart from hammering out of my chest. I was just enjoying my breakfast, I replied, my voice cracking a bit. I wasn't expecting to run into anyone in this hallway. Even as I said it, I was cursing myself. Of course I wasn't alone anymore. I'd come to this abandoned facility to scavenge old ship parts, but rumor had it I wasn't the only desperate soul scouring the place. She pushed off the wall in one fluid movement, her bioluminescent markings shifting color from a dusky purple to a soft, swirling blue. Her gaze dropped to the fruit in my hand. So that's a banana. Never actually saw a human eat one before. Her lips curved in a mischievous half-smile. She had lips that looked almost human, except the corners drew back just a bit too far, exposing a hint of pointed teeth. She stepped closer, the corridor's poor lighting dancing over skin that had a slight sheen, as though made for a different atmosphere or maybe a world more humid than this. Yeah, well, I cleared my throat, suddenly aware of how ridiculous I must look. It's not much to watch. You eat it. That's all. She cocked her head, eyes narrowing. Is it sweet? I blinked at the question. The banana? Yes, your banana. She bit off the word like it contained 100 intriguing secrets. I glanced down at the half-eaten thing. It had gone a little brown in transit, but it was still sweet enough. I nodded, not sure why I felt like I was being interrogated. She continued to stare at it, then at me, the swirl of color on her arms shifting a shade brighter. Your rations must be running low if you're eking out such a prize. Are you a pilot? A scavenger? The corridor's background hum buzzed around us, broken only by distant clangs of failing machinery. I drew a breath. Name's Ryu. I guess you could call me a scavenger. I've been picking through abandoned outposts for months, picking up whatever might fetch a decent price. Her eyes flicked over me, taking in my battered jacket, my frayed flight pants, the patch on my left sleeve that had once signified my affiliation with a small-time merc crew. I could practically taste her curiosity. She didn't offer her own name. Instead, she reached out with a hand that ended in slender, elongated fingers, each tipped with a faint glimmer of bioluminescence. She gently touched the banana's peel. I wasn't sure if she was about to yank it away or see for herself how it tasted. Her voice lowered in a fascinated hush. In my clan, we share food as an act of trust. I've never tasted anything from Earth before. She raised her gaze. Would you share? I let out a small laugh, both anxious and somewhat amused by the request. There's not much left, but sure. Without really thinking, I held the fruit out. Her delicate nostrils flared slightly as she inhaled the scent. I expected her to nibble off a piece, but instead, she gave a short, frustrated growl, like she realized she had no idea how to proceed. You peel it. Like this. I tugged the banana's peel down further, revealing more of the soft interior. Then you just take a bite. She studied me for a moment. Then, leaning in, she parted her lips and bit into the banana. She chewed thoughtfully, her bright eyes intent on my face. A hum of satisfaction rumbled in her throat, and I realized with a start that I found the sound intimate. It slid along my spine like a tactile caress. That's surprisingly sweet, she murmured. Her markings flared a new color, a deeper violet with pulses of green, almost like breathing light. Thank you, Ryu. I snapped my mouth shut and made a conscious effort to lift my gaze from her parted lips and the sharp canines that glinted there. You're welcome. And you are? She hesitated, glancing around the corridor, as if checking for eavesdroppers. Zilara. I'm here on, let's call it personal business. She pushed a stray lock of her shimmering hair behind a delicately ridged ear. This place might be derelict, but it has secrets my people need. I've got no intention of letting a human get in my way, banana or not. So watch yourself, pilot. My eyes narrowed. Scavenger. A grin tugged at her lips, and I realized that she might be teasing me. Her posture didn't seem overly hostile, though her casual mention of my people stirred a spike of concern in my gut. I'd heard rumors of an alien clan exiled here after some war dispute, or maybe they were refugees. Her presence alone suggested something bigger was going on. I forced the cocky edge into my voice. If you're threatening me, you should know I'm just after scrap parts. I'm not here to meddle in any high-stakes alien drama. Just let me do my job, and we'll both leave this rusted place in one piece. She took another bite of banana, finishing it off with surprising eagerness. Then she wiped her lips with the back of her hand and licked her fingers in a casual gesture that made my pulse spike again. Relax, she said. I'm not looking for trouble. Besides, she took a step closer, and though I tried to hold my ground, I could smell something faint and musky in the air, reminiscent of exotic flowers or deep ocean breezes. You're interesting to me. Maybe we can help each other. I swallowed, trying to keep my composure while her eyes danced with silent challenge. Help each other how? A trickle of overhead dust drifted down as the corridor vibrated with some distant system failure. She angled her head toward a sealed doorway. I've been trying to get past that old security hatch for days. If I'm right, there's something valuable on the other side, maybe something from the old experiments they ran here. If you'll help me bypass it, I'll let you take the salvageable tech you want. I folded my arms. And what do you want from that room? She smiled again, revealing those pointed canines in earnest. Information. Maybe more. Don't worry about it too much, pilot, scavenger. My business there won't interfere with your haul. But I need someone who's good with a plasma torch and resourceful in a pinch. Think that's you? I hesitated. I didn't trust her, but a job was a job. The outpost was rumored to have old slip drive components that I could resell for a fortune if I found them. If she already knew her way around, maybe she'd cut my search time in half. It wasn't like I had many allies in this decaying fortress of metal and stale air. I shrugged in a show of nonchalance. Fine. Let's see if we can crack that hatch. But if I catch you trying to backstab me, or if your people show up to claim the place, I'm out. The ghost of a laugh parted her lips as she moved past me, brushing close enough that I felt a prickle of her strange body heat. Understood, Ryu, she purred. Her voice filled the narrow hallway. Lead the way with that plasma torch, and I promise you'll get more than just scrap out of this. Despite the messy corridor and the gloom, my pulse felt too bright in my veins. A slow heat crept through me, some dangerous mixture of curiosity and attraction. I told myself it was just a job. But I couldn't deny I wanted to know more about this alien woman who had stepped so boldly into my path, and who had looked at my banana as though it were the most intriguing delicacy in the universe. We moved along in silence, passing through debris-strewn corridors with flickering lights. Occasionally, I'd glance at Zalara. She walked with a predatory elegance, her markings shifting color every so often, like her emotions were playing out across her skin. It was both captivating and unnerving. She didn't show any sign of fear in these abandoned halls. A distant hiss of leaking atmosphere somewhere deeper in the outpost reminded me that our time here was limited. When we reached the sealed hatch, it was as tough as she'd described. The panel beside the door was shot, scorched from a previous attempt to cut in. I set down my gear and began fiddling with wires, hooking them into my portable generator so I could power up the mechanism. Zalara stepped behind me, too close for comfort, close enough that I felt her breath against my neck. Patience, I muttered, trying to keep from shivering. This might take a while. The system's fried, and the locks could still be charged with residual energy. Her voice was low, that same purring resonance. I'm in no hurry, as long as you get it open. I didn't respond, focusing instead on splicing the wires. Sparks flew, and the console sputtered to life. A flicker of static leapt across the cracked screen. I entered a few override commands, but the door didn't budge. I muttered a curse under my breath. Zalara's hand slid over my shoulder, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Is that what humans do when faced with mechanical frustration? You speak insults to the machines? I shook her off with more bravado than I felt. It helps sometimes. She laughed, a musical sound that echoed off the metal walls. Then she lightly pushed past me, her luminous fingers dancing over the console. Let me try my code sequence. Maybe there's still something left of the original data logs. I watched as her markings brightened, as if channeling energy into her fingertips. When she pressed a combination of keys, the console beeped and the door let out a grinding groan, slowly sliding open a few inches before stopping again, jammed by some internal mechanism. She stepped back, chest heaving slightly, and gave me a wry look. Your turn, scavenger. Melt through the rest. I grabbed my plasma torch, flicked it on with a hiss, and began carefully cutting where the door was jammed. Sparks rained down, illuminating our faces. She stood behind me, all silent tension, and I could practically feel her breath on my collar. After a minute, there was a screech, and the door slid open enough for us to squeeze inside. We emerged into a lab, or what had once been one. Cabinets lined the walls, some smashed open. A thick layer of dust covered everything, and the overhead lights were completely dead, leaving us in the glow of her markings and the flicker of my handheld lantern. The air tasted stale and metallic, like old regrets and forgotten experiments. Zalara stepped ahead, scanning the room with a strange device she pulled from her belt. I set my lantern on a table and started picking through debris, on the lookout for anything salvageable. Most of it looked too ancient or damaged to be worthwhile. Got something, Zalara murmured, her voice echoing in the musty space. She crouched by a console that stood out from the others. It had a glass tube connected to it, big enough to hold a small creature, though it was cracked and empty now. She brushed dust off a panel with her palm, revealing alien script. Yes, she breathed, sounding almost reverent. This is the reason I came here. I paused, hooking my thumbs into my belt. What is it? She gave me a lingering glance. Information about my species. We heard rumors that your Terran scientists had captured some of my people and ran tests on them, way back during the resource wars. We never knew exactly what they were doing. We just knew some never came home. Suddenly, the air felt heavier. I didn't know what to say. The outposts the Terran forces had used during the wars were rumored to be places of unspeakable experiments. It wouldn't be far-fetched that her people had been victims. She tried a command on the console. Sparks flew, and a series of garbled data scrolled across a cracked monitor. Zalara's face hardened. These logs might have the proof we need, or at least tell me where they took our lost clan people. She tried pressing a few more keys, but the console kept glitching. I set aside my own moral discomfort and edged closer, checking the wires. Maybe I can patch power from my portable unit into the console. It's old Terran tech, so I might know a workaround. Our shoulders touched as we both leaned over the damaged machinery. I heard the catch of her breath, felt a strange electric tension pass between us. With a grunt, I clipped my generator's cables to the console, careful not to short anything out. The monitor flickered, stabilized for a moment, then spat out half-coherent lines of text. Zalara frowned, scanning the readout with tense concentration. Her luminous eyes caught on a particular line. Subject transport, transferred to holding Site 9, awaiting further directives. They never came back. She pressed her palm flat to the screen, and the glow in her markings flickered as if in distress. Hey, I said softly, unsure why I felt the need to comfort her. We'll find out what happened. These logs might give a clue. She exhaled slowly, her body trembling with suppressed emotion. Thank you, she whispered. Then she pulled away, as though embarrassed by her own vulnerability. Your turn to salvage. See what you can find. I need to process this. I didn't push her. Instead, I moved around the lab, sifting through crates and compartments for anything I could hawk. And though I found a few interesting bits, a partial slip drive stabilizer, an old energy cell that might still function. I found my attention drifting back to Zalara, noticing the way she huddled near the console, shoulders tight with grief or maybe anger. Something in my chest tightened. I approached her slowly, mindful of her personal space. She looked up at me, her expression conflicted. "This place is worse than I imagined," she said quietly. "Everything here reeks of what they did to us." I glanced around the dusty lab, the shattered glass, the stale smell of chemicals, and felt a small wave of shame for my own species' rumored cruelty. "We can't change the past," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But maybe we can give you some closure." She nodded, swallowing hard. Then she rose to her full height and squared her shoulders. "Let's copy all this data and get out of here. We've already lingered too long. Who knows what security drones might still be active." She fiddled with the data chip, slotting it into the console's side. The screen blinked, transferring lines of text at a snail's pace. I used the wait time to pack up my salvage. My mind, however, stayed half-focused on her. There was a rawness in the air between us now, an understanding that went beyond a shared banana or a hasty alliance. When the data transfer finished, we slipped out of the lab and sealed the door behind us, ensuring no one else would stumble on the same information. As we made our way down the corridor, the hush of stale air pressed in around us. Zalara walked just a step ahead, her luminous markings guiding us, shifting in subtle patterns that I was beginning to read as her emotional states. At a collapsed junction, we slid around a broken beam and found ourselves in a wide chamber that had once been a docking bay. Here, the metal floor was buckled in places, and overhead panels dangled precariously. I flashed my lantern around, searching for a path. "Have you found anything else worth taking?" Zalara asked, her voice subdued. I pointed at my pack. "A few ship components. Nothing major. But if we can restore a bit more power, maybe the outpost storage bay might still hold something valuable." She glanced around, eyes narrowed. "I need some time to go through the data I extracted. But I don't want us to split up." I wondered if it was because she didn't trust me yet, or if she was worried about more immediate threats. Either way, I felt a reluctant relief at not having to wander this place alone. "We can head to the control room. If there's a functioning console, we can interface with the main systems and run a quick search for salvage. That's half the reason I came here. And maybe you can decode that data in the meantime." She nodded, face set with a solemn resolve. "Let's go." We navigated battered corridors for another quarter-hour, ducking under fallen pipes and wading through dust-laden rubble. All the while, my mind drifted back to that moment she first watched me eat. She had teased me, asked if bananas were some kind of Terran mating ritual, but as we walked in silence, I found myself uncomfortably aware that I was physically drawn to her. She was unlike any alien I'd encountered, both in her luminous grace and the depth of her glances. Finally, we found the control room. It was smaller than I expected, crammed with monitors and half-toppled chairs. The overhead lights flickered weakly, revealing a bank of consoles that might still be salvageable. Zalara and I exchanged glances. Without words, we set to work, me attempting to power up a console, her rummaging through dusty compartments for any data drives that might hold more clues. A few minutes later, my console pinged to life. Flickering lines scrolled across the screen, referencing old station logs and partial map files. I whistled softly. "Looks like we can run a station-wide diagnostic. Maybe see if there are any sealed compartments worth looting." She drifted over to my side close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. Her scent, that faintly sweet, musky aroma, tickled my senses again. I tried not to show how it affected me, but my heart gave a traitorous lurch. "I'm beginning the scan," I muttered, entering commands on the archaic Terran interface. The screen lit up with a schematic of the outpost. Red sections indicated collapsed areas, while blue ones seemed to have intact life support, though probably minimal. A blinking sector on the lower level caught my eye. It had a label, experimental storage. "That might be our best bet for salvage," I said. Zalara peered at the screen. "We should check it out, but carefully." Who knows what experiments they kept there? I nodded. As I turned away from the console, my hand brushed hers. A spark seemed to jump between our skin, her exotic warmth meeting my cooler human temperature. Our eyes met, and for a split second, words failed me. I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze, maybe even vulnerability. But it vanished as she stepped back, clearing her throat. "Let's move," she said, her voice edged with a tension I couldn't quite decode. We set off again, deeper into the station, following rusted stairways and half-functional lifts. With every step, the gloom grew heavier, the oppressive silence broken only by the creaking of old metal. My mind lingered on Zalara's closeness, the way my body reacted to her presence. I reminded myself that attraction was a complication I couldn't afford. Not now. Not when we were in a place that was rumored to house horrors from a past war. We reached a massive door labeled Experimental Storage. A large sign in faded Terran script read, Hazard Level Maximum. I frowned. Great. That's reassuring. Zalara studied the console beside the door. I think the lock's engaged from the inside. We'll have to override it. I fiddled with wires, hooking them again to my portable generator. After some tinkering, the heavy door let out a groan and slid open, revealing a dark chamber lined with sealed containment units. A stale chemical odor wafted out, making my eyes water. Stay close, I murmured, stepping into the gloom. Zalara followed, her glow illuminating the shapes of tall cylinders and storage lockers. We passed row after row of glass chambers, all empty. My heart pounded at the thought of what they might once have contained. Near the far wall, a metal case caught my eye. It looked intact, possibly with salvageable tech inside. I bent down to examine it. Zalara hovered behind me, scanning the area with that device again. Without warning, a red light flickered across the chamber. My head snapped up, and I saw a security turret come to life in a corner, pivoting its barrel toward us with a mechanical whir. Down! I shouted, yanking Zalara behind a heavy crate. A spray of bullets or energy rounds, hard to tell in the gloom, ripped through the air, clattering off metal surfaces. My heart hammered. We were pinned. Zalara's eyes flashed. She pulled a slim, disc-like object from her belt. Cover me, she hissed, sliding away before I could protest. I peeked around the crate, drawing my own sidearm. I fired a few shots at the turret, making it stutter and pause, but not enough to destroy it. Zalara dashed across the open space, rolling behind another stack of crates. The turret swiveled her way, letting loose another barrage. Sparks flew where the rounds slammed into metal. I leapt up, returning fire. My bullets pinged uselessly against the turret's armored mount. Then I heard a metallic clang and saw Zalara toss her disc-like gadget under the turret's base. There was a flash of blue light, a crackle of energy, and the turret sputtered, spinning wildly before it went limp. Silence settled in, broken only by my labored breathing. Nice move, I called out, staggering to my feet. Zalara emerged from cover, her markings dancing in triumph. A little trick my people use to short-circuit enemy systems, she said, tossing me a grin that made me feel warmer than I cared to admit. We pressed on, more cautious now. I pried open the metal case I'd spotted earlier and found a set of sealed canisters that might fetch a high price, as well as a battered box that looked suspiciously like it housed advanced medical supplies. Zalara took a data slate from another container and quickly flipped through the contents, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her luminous eyes darkened. These are logs, detailed records of the experiments done on captive subjects. She cut off, swallowing hard. This is worse than I imagined. My people, others, they were testing ways to harness our bioluminescent energy for weapons. A cold chill settled over me. The resource wars had ended years ago, but their scars clearly lingered. If you want these logs, take them. Use them as proof, or whatever you need. She nodded, carefully storing the slate. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Thank you, Ryu. You've done more for me than I expected when we first met. A moment stretched between us, heavy with something I could only call empathy. It was strange, feeling connected to someone so different, a woman from a species once considered an enemy by humans. I cleared my throat awkwardly, trying to lighten the mood. So, about the banana thing. She blinked, then let out a shaky laugh. You're not going to drop that, are you? I shrugged, forcing a grin. You were the one who asked if it was a mating ritual. She shook her head, some of the tension melting from her face. Let's just say I'd be interested in exploring more culinary experiences. Maybe once we're off this dead station, you can show me the best of Earth's delicacies. I felt my cheeks warm, hating that she might see it. Sure. I've got a stash of weird Terran food if we make it out of here alive. She gave a small nod, but her eyes told me she appreciated the attempt to ease the darkness of this place. I rummaged through more storage units, snagging a few more items that might sell, and we made our way out. On the walk back to a safer corridor, we fell into a hush again, but it wasn't the tense silence of strangers. It felt more like the quiet that follows a shared secret. My chest felt tight, a mix of adrenaline and a growing awareness of the alien woman at my side. Her presence pulled at me in ways I couldn't fully explain, like some primal recognition, a sense that we both walk lonely paths in a universe full of exploitation and violence, and that we might find a fleeting moment of solace in each other's company. The hallway lights flickered ominously. A distant clang echoed through the station, possibly more security systems, or maybe just the metal skeleton of the outpost settling. We needed a plan, and soon. But as we approached a branching corridor that led to the outpost's command center, Zilara reached out and touched my arm. Wait, she said softly. I turned, aware of her closeness, aware of my heart thudding in my throat. The hush stretched, and I realized she was staring at me with those luminous eyes, swirling with color. What is it? I asked, my voice suddenly hoarse. She hesitated, then brushed her fingers along my hand. The contact made me shiver. You've helped me, maybe more than you realize. I don't want to keep secrets from you. If we're to survive whatever this place still holds, you should know my true purpose here. I swallowed hard. I'm listening. She looked away, struggling with her words. I told you I came for information about my people. That's true. But there's another reason. A personal one. Her gaze flicked back to meet mine, and the violet-blue glow on her arms brightened. A reason that might make you see me differently. I exhaled slowly. A part of me was afraid of what she might say, but a stronger part wanted to break through the tension. Zilara, I'm not sure I care about your secrets as long as... Her hand squeezed mine, startling me. Hear me out. My clan exiled me because I refused an arranged bond, because I put my own desires above the clan's political alliances. They called me reckless, said I had no right to follow my heart over the clan's future. I've been wandering alone, trying to prove my worth, trying to reclaim my standing. This station's data is my one chance to show that we were wrong, that the Terrans took something precious from us, something that might unite our people again. But I'm also searching for a place where I can belong on my own terms. No forced bond. No compromise. My throat was tight. That sounds like a heavy burden to carry alone. She nodded, her eyes flickering with raw emotion. It is. And I don't expect you to trust me fully, Rhea. But I want you to know that my personal stake in this is big. I'm not just some cold-hearted operative. I might do anything to secure that data, but it's for the survival of my clan, and for my own right to choose my path. The intensity in her gaze made my breath itch. I get it, I said quietly. I've been alone for a long time too. The wars took my friends, my livelihood. Now I scrape by, scavenging to survive. Sometimes I wonder if I even have a place in this galaxy. So, maybe we both have something to prove. The corner of her mouth curved into a faint smile. The swirling colors in her markings softened to a more tranquil hue, and in the dim corridor, it looked hauntingly beautiful. Thank you for hearing me. She didn't let go of my hand for a long moment. We stood there, two wanderers in a crumbling station, sharing a rare moment of honest connection. Then the lights flickered again, reminding us of the precarious environment. Zalara dropped her hand, stepping back. We should find a safe spot to rest, and I need to decode the logs. Maybe I can glean the final location of those who were taken. Then we can decide what's next. I nodded. The command center might still have a secured room we can barricade. Let's head that way. As we walked, I tried to ignore the way my pulse fluttered whenever her shoulder brushed mine or when I caught a whiff of her intriguing scent. This was no time to be fantasizing about an alien woman, no matter how mesmerizing her presence was. But that didn't stop my mind from replaying the subtle heat in her gaze, or the memory of how her lips had closed around the banana, or how the hum of approval had echoed in her throat like a half-hidden moan. I pushed the thoughts aside. Keep it together, Ryu, I told myself. Surviving came first. Yet deep down, a new pulse beat through my veins, a need that was more than just hunger or self-preservation. And as we neared the command center, I found myself stealing glances at Zalara, wondering if she felt it too. We slipped through the command center's broken door, scanning the dark room for threats. Finding none, I helped her move a heavy piece of debris to block the entrance. Only then did we let out a collective breath. The space was cramped, with a couple of battered consoles and a few chairs. A flicker of emergency lighting gave just enough illumination to see each other's faces. Zalara set her device on a console and began interfacing it with the data logs. This might take a while. The encryption is old but complicated. I busied myself checking the corners, ensuring no hidden turrets or drones. After verifying we were alone, I dropped my gear and slumped into a chair, exhaustion creeping in. My body still buzzed with adrenaline, though. The station was a tomb of old atrocities, yet I couldn't help feeling alive in a way I hadn't in years. Zalara perched on the edge of another chair, the faint glow of the console reflecting off her features. Her hair, if it could be called that, cascaded around her shoulders in shimmering strands, each pulsing slightly with her shifting emotions. A bead of sweat trailed down her temple, and I found myself transfixed by the motion. She noticed my stare and raised an eyebrow. I quickly looked away, clearing my throat. So, how long do you think it'll take? She exhaled. Not sure. Give me a few minutes to see if I can decode this. Meanwhile, keep watch. I nodded, forcing myself to stand and pace near the barricaded door, hand on my sidearm. The corridor outside was dark and still, but I didn't trust the quiet. My gaze flicked back to her every so often. She looked tense but determined, her fingers dancing across the console with fluid precision. Minutes passed in thick silence. Finally, she let out a soft hiss of triumph. I'm in. The data logs show there's another facility, deeper under this one. It's not on any official schematic, but it's connected through an old elevator shaft. Holding Site 9 is real. It might still exist. I frowned, stepping closer. You're saying there's more to this place than what we've seen? She nodded grimly. And if the captives were transferred there, they might have, well, who knows what we'll find. My stomach churned at the thought. Is it worth the risk to go looking for it? She lifted her gaze to mine, luminous eyes shining with a fierce light. For me it is. If there's even a remote chance we can find evidence or survivors, or remains that we can lay to rest, my people need to know. I hesitated. I had come here for salvage, and in truth, I had already collected enough to eke out a decent profit. Was it worth risking my life to go deeper into the station's bowels for something that might be haunted by the past? I stared into her eyes, saw the pain and the hope swirling there, and my resolve wavered. All right, I said quietly. We'll try. But we need a plan, and rest. Zalara nodded, relief washing over her features for a moment. Yes. Rest. She gave the console a quick glance. I'll keep scanning these logs, see if I can get more details on how to access that hidden facility. You should sleep while you can. I scoffed lightly. Sleep? In this place? She offered a small, rueful smile. We'll take turns. I'll keep watch first. I know you don't trust me completely, but we need to trust each other at least enough for this. I studied her, weighing the danger versus the potential reward. Finally, I ran a hand through my messy hair and nodded. All right. Wake me if something moves out there, or if you decode anything important. She agreed, and I set up a makeshift bed with some spare cloth in the corner. I used my pack as a pillow, my sidearm still gripped loosely in my hand. It wasn't comfortable, but I let my tired eyes drift shut, lulled by the faint hum of old machinery and Zalara's gentle tapping on the console. My thoughts wandered, refusing to fully quiet. They circled around the memory of her biting into that banana, how her lips had parted. They lingered on the way she looked at me in the corridor, the softness in her voice when she spoke of exile and defiance. I barely knew her, yet I felt pulled by her presence. Something about her vulnerability behind that confident, teasing exterior resonated with my own guarded wounds. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a restless sleep. Dreams came in fragments, drifting through dark hallways, losing the banana, her luminous eyes cutting through the shadows, the press of her body close to mine. I woke at one point, startled by the echo of distant clangs. In the dim light, I saw Zalara crouched by the door, her posture alert. She glanced back at me with a nod, and I let the tension ease, slipping back into uneasy slumber. When next I opened my eyes, she was seated at the console, head bowed as though reading. My internal clock told me I'd slept maybe an hour, 2 at most. My body ached, but I forced myself upright. "How's it going?" I asked quietly, mindful of the hush that filled the command center. She startled slightly, then glanced over her shoulder. Her expression was drawn, her markings duller than before. "I've decoded most of it, but there's a catch. The elevator shaft is heavily locked down. We'll need clearance codes, and from what I can see, they're stored in the warden's office. Another part of the station that might be locked up tight." I sighed, rolling my stiff shoulders. "Of course. Nothing's easy in a place like this." A small smile ghosted across her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. She stood, stretching with a subtle grace that caught my attention. "Your turn on watch. I need to rest a bit, or I'll be useless." I nodded. "Go ahead. I'll keep an eye out." Zalara found a relatively comfortable spot against the far wall, tucking her limbs into a loose crouch. Her eyes fluttered shut, but her markings remained faintly lit, shifting in slow waves. I wondered if that was involuntary or if she was controlling them in her sleep. For a long time, I paced the small command center, occasionally pressing my ear to the door. The station felt eerily quiet, like a beast lying in wait. My thoughts swirled around the improbable alliance I'd formed with this alien woman, about the reasons I felt so compelled to help her. Maybe it was guilt over what my species had done. Maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe I just didn't want to walk away from someone who needed me, who clearly stirred something deep in my chest. Eventually, Zalara stirred, blinking awake. She inhaled, her markings brightening slightly, then rose to her feet in a fluid motion. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded. "As I'll ever be." She slipped back to the console, double-checking the map. "Warden's office is on the other side of the station, near the detention blocks. We'll have to cut through a couple of partially collapsed areas, but we can make it." I slung my pack over my shoulder. "Lead the way." She made for the door, but paused at my side for just a moment, her gaze flicking up to meet mine. A question seemed to hover there, unspoken. Then she smiled slightly and pushed aside the debris, opening the command center door. I followed, my pulse thrumming with anticipation that was as much about her as it was about the dangers ahead. We walked side by side through the corridors, our footfalls echoing in the stillness. Occasionally, we'd hear a distant clank or hiss, but we saw no sign of security drones or turrets. Maybe we'd disabled most of them, or maybe we were just lucky. The air felt even more stale, though, and the overhead lights were weaker than before. Part of me worried that life support was failing station-wide. As we passed a shattered window overlooking a large docking bay, I caught a glimpse of Zalara's reflection. She glanced my way, meeting my eyes in the glass. Neither of us spoke, but the fleeting connection sparked a small warmth in my chest. We pressed on, following the map's route. At one point, we had to climb over a collapsed walkway that had caved into the level below. Zalara went first, her agile body moving with a dancer's grace. I followed, not nearly as fluid, cursing under my breath as metal shards snagged my pant leg. She helped me up on the far side, her grip strong and steady, and I found myself murmuring thanks, my heart beating faster from the contact. The warden's office turned out to be a reinforced door in a corridor lined with what looked like cell blocks. The door's control panel was surprisingly intact. Zalara studied it. I might be able to hack it, but we should be prepared for alarms. I readied my sidearm, scanning the corridor behind us. Go for it. She tapped a sequence on the panel. Red lights flared, and a shrill alarm rang out, echoing through the hallway. I swore under my breath, bracing for the worst. The door slid open, and Zalara darted inside. I followed, quickly shutting down the alarm from an internal console. Inside, the office was cluttered with old files, overturned furniture, and a flickering holographic display that shimmered over a cracked desk. Zalara moved to the display, rummaging through what looked like digital files for the clearance codes. Meanwhile, I kept watch at the doorway. Got it, she said after a minute, triumph in her voice. These codes should unlock the elevator that leads to the hidden facility. And there might be logs here about the warden's personal involvement. I glanced over. Any mention of live captives still down there? She shook her head. No specifics, just references to experiments continuing even after the war ended. If anyone survived, they'd be gone by now. But we'll see. A crash in the hallway cut our conversation short. I spun, raising my weapon. Zalara was at my side in an instant. The overhead lights flickered, plunging us into half-darkness. My stomach twisted, convinced we weren't alone anymore. Stay close, she whispered. We edged out of the office, scanning the cell block. A row of iron bars gleamed faintly, each cell empty except for dusty cots. The silence was oppressive. Then something moved in the darkness, a shape stumbling against a broken console, knocking it over. My finger tightened on the trigger. Show yourself! No response, just a ragged breathing sound. Zalara stepped forward, her markings brightening to cast a glow. That's when we saw it, a figure, hunched and shivering, with tattered clothing clinging to a gaunt frame. Human? Possibly. They turned toward us, revealing hollow eyes and a face contorted in fear. Zalara inhaled sharply. Who are you? The figure's voice came out a rasp. Help me! We exchanged a stunned look. Neither of us had expected to find anyone alive here, especially not in the detention area. I lowered my weapon and took a cautious step closer. We won't hurt you, I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. We're just passing through. What happened to you? The figure cringed away, shaking. They left me here. Everyone left, thought I was dead. No more experiments. Their words were disjointed, but enough to send a chill down my spine. Zalara's jaw tightened. She knelt by the stranger, carefully placing a hand on their shoulder. We can get you out. Do you know anything about the lower facility? The strangers shook their head wildly, eyes wide with terror. No, only that the warden took them below, never came back. I exhaled, feeling sympathy twist in my gut. We'll get you to safety. Or at least somewhere better than this. We helped the stranger to their feet, an older man, probably Terran, though so malnourished it was hard to tell. He clutched at us, legs wobbling. Zalara looked at me with concern. He won't make it on his own. I nodded, mind racing. We can guide him back to the command center. It's not perfect, but it's safer than here. Then we have to go down to the lower levels. Zalara frowned. That will cost us time. A pang of guilt rippled through me. We can't just leave him. She studied the trembling man and slowly nodded. All right. Let's move quickly. We half carried him through the corridors, retracing our route. The station's failing systems made the journey treacherous. Twice we had to detour around collapsed passages that hadn't been collapsed before. A sense of impending doom weighed on me, as though the outpost might crumble at any moment. The man barely spoke, lost in some haze of trauma. Zalara's face was grim, her strides purposeful. When we finally reached the command center, we set him in a corner with some water and wrapped him in a spare blanket from my pack. I checked his vitals as best I could, though I wasn't a medic. He was weak, but stable enough for now. Zalara hovered nearby, arms folded across her chest. Her gaze flicked between the man and me, her markings a restless swirl. "We've done what we can." He looked up at us, eyes watery with gratitude. "Aye, thank you," he croaked. I offered a tight smile. "Stay here. We'll come back for you." He nodded weakly, seeming to slip into a half-doze. Zalara tugged at my sleeve, indicating it was time to go. We stepped out into the corridor again, leaving him as safe as we could manage. The path to the hidden elevator shaft lay deeper in the station, past an area with multiple structural warnings on the schematic. My chest felt tight with unease. "If we do this," I murmured, "we go in fast and get out fast." Zalara nodded, her voice hushed. "Agreed. But I have to see it, Ryu. I have to know." We continued in tense silence. The further we went, the more the station's condition worsened, walls buckled, lights flickered, and the air smelled of old chemicals and rust. Finally, we reached a large elevator door sealed by thick metal shutters. I plugged in the clearance codes. There was a moment of electric tension, and then the shutters groaned open. Zalara and I stepped inside the elevator chamber, a metal box that looked half-rusted to death. With a spark of power from my portable generator, the control panel lit. I selected the unknown lower level. The elevator jerked, then rumbled downward in a grinding, uneven motion that made my stomach lurch. Zalara grabbed the railing. Her eyes darted to me. "If we survive this, remind me never to trust ancient Terran technology again." "Deal," I said, forcing a smirk. We descended into darkness for what felt like ages. The elevator finally shuddered to a halt, the doors sliding open onto a corridor lit by flickering emergency lamps. An oppressive hush clung to the air, heavier than anywhere else in the station. "Stay close," she whispered, stepping out with cat-like caution. The corridor led to a door labeled, "Holding Site 9." My heart hammered. I could feel Zalara trembling, though she hid it well. We'd come this far, no turning back now. I placed my hand on the door's manual release. It hissed open, revealing a wide chamber lined with pods of some sort, rows upon rows of cylindrical capsules, many cracked or broken. A pungent chemical scent hit me, making my eyes water. Zalara moved forward, her glow revealing what was inside some of the intact pods, remains, twisted and half-preserved by stasis fluid, horrific evidence of the experiments. My stomach lurched, but Zalara pressed on, scanning the pods with a shaking hand. Then, in one corner, we found something shocking, a few pods still operational, with faint lights blinking on their control panels. She ran up to them, pressing her hands against the glass. Inside one, I saw a shape that looked eerily like Zalara's species, thin, elongated, with those ridged ears. But it didn't move. Tears glistened in Zalara's eyes, shimmering in the glow of her markings. She whispered something in her own language, voice thick with grief. They never freed them. They left them here to die in stasis." A lump formed in my throat. "I'm sorry." She bowed her head, face contorted. "I have to shut these pods down properly. Maybe I can retrieve their remains for a proper ceremony." I swallowed, stepping closer. My instincts screamed to keep watch. This chamber felt like a tomb with the potential to turn hostile any second. While Zalara tapped the control panels, tears slipping down her cheeks, I scanned the area, trying to ignore the icy dread creeping up my spine. Suddenly, a scuttling sound echoed from the far end of the chamber. I swung my flashlight around, catching a glimpse of something moving, an automated drone, perhaps. I hissed at Zalara. "We're not alone." She tore her gaze from the stasis pods, eyes refocusing. "Get ready," she breathed, stepping into a defensive stance. A shape emerged, a tall, spindly automaton with multiple limbs, each ending in menacing tools or weapons. It lurched forward on squeaking joints, green lights flickering in its chest panel. I recognized it as an old Terran experimental guard drone, rumored to be near unstoppable. "Back away," I muttered, trying to circle around it. But the drone clicked and whirred, locking onto us. An electronic voice crackled from its speaker. "Unauthorized presence. Lethal force engaged." Zalara swore in her language. We both dove for cover as the drone's arms lit up, one launching a volley of energy bursts that sizzled through the air. My pulse pounded as we scrambled behind a row of damaged pods. "How do we stop it?" Zalara shouted over the barrage. I peeked around the corner, returning a few shots from my sidearm. The rounds bounced off the drone's thick plating. "We might have to disable its power source or fry its circuits." She nodded, slipping her disc-like EMP device from her belt. I saw her mouth form the words, "Cover me," and I gave a quick nod back. I jumped up, drawing its fire while shooting wildly. The drone's aim zeroed in on me, forcing me to duck behind a stasis pod that exploded from the impact of an energy burst. A sickening smell of burning chemicals filled the air. Zalara dashed across open ground, hurling her EMP disc. It landed near the drone's base, crackling with electricity. But the drone pivoted with frightening speed, slamming a metal leg onto the disc. There was a flash of sparks and smoke, and the device was crushed. "Damn it!" Zalara hissed, trying to dodge away. The drone swung an arm, catching her across the side. She let out a cry, tumbling across the floor. My chest constricted at the sight. I fired again, emptying my magazine into the drone's back. The bullets did little more than scratch the plating, but it distracted the machine long enough for Zalara to scramble behind another set of pods. We locked eyes across the chamber. She was breathing hard, clutching her side. The drone turned my way, arms charging another volley. Adrenaline surged in me. I had no chance in a direct firefight. Then I noticed the overhead piping, dripping some unknown coolant or chemical. If I could rupture the pipe above the drone, maybe the fluid could short-circuit it or freeze its systems. I gestured wildly for Zalara to notice the pipes. Her eyes tracked my gaze, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. I reached into my pack, grabbing one of the small explosive charges I carried for breaching doors. Signaling her with a look, I moved along the side, trying to get a clear shot at the overhead pipe. The drone tracked me, launching another barrage. The blast scorched the floor, sparks dancing around my boots. My heart thundered as I ducked behind a metal crate. Across the room, Zalara inched around, drawing the drone's attention by throwing a piece of debris. The machine pivoted, giving me just enough time. I armed the charge, hurled it upward, and prayed my aim was good. The charge latched onto the pipe, beeped twice, and detonated in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. A torrent of freezing coolant rained down on the drone, coating its limbs. It let out a warbled screech, thrashing wildly as the fluid seeped into its joints and circuits. Zalara took the opportunity to dart forward and ram a spiked piece of metal into a gap in the drone's plating, presumably damaging some vital system. With a final shudder, the drone collapsed, sizzling with short circuits. Steam rose around it, the smell acrid. I slumped against a broken pod, chest heaving. Zalara dropped to her knees beside me, panting, her side bleeding from a shallow cut. "Nice work," she managed, giving me a shaky smile. I offered a faint grin in return. "Couldn't have done it without you." We both looked around the chamber, the aftermath of the fight leaving wrecked stasis pods and chemical spills. A sorrowful hush returned. Zalara exhaled a quivering breath, stepping to the side to finish shutting down the last active pods. She murmured soft words in her language, perhaps a prayer or a farewell, her eyes glistening. I watched, not wanting to intrude on her grief. When she was done, she turned to me, eyes wet but resolute. "They deserve a funeral pyre, but we can't do that here. At least they're not trapped in stasis anymore." I placed a comforting hand on her arm. "You've done them a kindness," she sniffed, blinking hard. Then her gaze flicked to the data terminals along the wall. "This might be where they kept the final records. If there's anything that proves what happened, it'll be here." I nodded, letting her lean on me as we moved to the terminals. While she plugged in her device to copy data, I tore a strip of cloth from my bag to bandage her side. The wound wasn't too deep, but it bled enough to worry me. She hissed in pain when I tightened it, but thanked me with a shaky smile. Her eyes lingered on me. Ryu, She paused, swallowing. I'm grateful for your help. And I know this is more than you bargained for. I forced a half laugh. I did come for salvage, but apparently I found something else entirely. She reached up, brushing her fingertips along my jaw, a fleeting touch that made my pulse pound. Her gaze shone with genuine warmth, tempered by exhaustion and sorrow. When we're out of here, if we make it out, I hope to repay your kindness. My throat went dry. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She withdrew her hand, busying herself with the data transfer. Despite the gloom and the horror around us, something in me felt painfully alive in that moment. It took a few minutes to get everything copied. Then we made our way back to the elevator, stepping over the drone's remains. Zalara lingered for a moment by the row of stasis pods, whispering a final farewell in her tongue. Then we ascended, the elevator groaning under the strain. Returning to the upper levels felt like surfacing from a nightmare, though the station was still a decaying tomb. We carefully made our way to the command center. The older man we'd rescued was asleep in the corner, breathing shallow but steady. Zalara sank into a chair, cradling her injured side, while I checked the station's status on her remaining console. The readings weren't good. The station's power reserves were nearly depleted. Soon, the life support systems might fail entirely. I rubbed a hand over my face, exhausted. We need to get out of here soon. Zalara nodded, brows furrowed. Agreed. I have the data I came for. And you've got your salvage. If we can find a functioning ship, or at least enough parts to fix yours, let's leave. I hesitated. My ship is docked at the outer bay, but it's missing a slip drive stabilizer. I found a partial one earlier, but I'm not sure it's enough to get us safely through hyperspace. She shrugged. We'll manage. Better than staying here to suffocate. Let me see if I can help. We helped the old man to his feet, half carrying him through the winding corridors toward the docking bay. He was too weak to be of much help, but we couldn't leave him behind. Along the way, I discovered a second stabilizer in one of the sealed crates. Zalara helped me check its compatibility with the partial unit. With a bit of creative engineering, we might be able to jury-rig my ship to function, at least long enough to jump away from this cursed place. In the docking bay, my ship looked battered but serviceable. I guided the old man to a small bunk inside, where he collapsed with relief. Then Zalara and I worked under the hull, installing the stabilizer components. Her knowledge of hybrid technology surprised me. She showed me how to fuse her species' energy modulators into the slip drive to boost stability. As we worked, sweat dripped from my brow. I heard her breath hitch every so often, likely from the pain in her side. When we finally finished, I leaned back, checking the precarious connections. That should hold, maybe. Zalara brushed her hair aside, meeting my gaze in the dim light of the docking bay. We don't have any other option. Let's hope your ship's reactor can power this. We climbed inside, sealing the hatch behind us. The old man was still unconscious, but alive. Zalara strapped into the co-pilot's seat as I fired up the engines. A rumble vibrated through the vessel, and my console displays flickered uncertainly. Come on, girl, I muttered to the ship, coaxing it to life. The docking clamps released with a clank, and I maneuvered us out of the bay. The station's exterior loomed on my screen, a drifting mass of twisted metal. I felt a pang of relief as we cleared its perimeter. Zalara studied the sensor readouts. We're not being followed, but the station is sending out emergency pings. Maybe it's on the verge of meltdown. Let's not stick around to find out. I set coordinates for the nearest trade route, though it was a long jump away. The slip drive hummed ominously. I steadied my nerves and engaged it. Lights flared across the cockpit, and reality seemed to warp for a moment as we jumped into hyperspace. The ship rattled, metal groaning. Zalara's hand shot out, gripping my arm. My heart pounded, but after a tense few seconds, the shaking subsided. We were in the slipstream, forging ahead. A collective breath of relief escaped us. Zalara's hand lingered on my arm, her grip loosening slowly. I gave a weary smile. I guess this means we're safe, for now. She nodded, her eyes reflecting the swirling lights outside. Thank you, Rhea. You saved more than just me back there. My gaze flicked to the corridor behind us, where the old man slept. Well, guess we're a rescue team now. Once we reach a civilized port, we can get him proper help. And you? She tilted her head, curious. Me? I swallowed, my voice suddenly catching. You can do what you need with those data logs. Clear your name, show your clan what really happened. Or whatever you decide. Her expression softened, a tender glow lighting her features. And you? Back to scavenging? I let out a humorless chuckle. I haven't really thought that far ahead. I was just trying to stay alive. She turned her chair to face me fully. I told you I'd repay your kindness. My people, for all our flaws, do not forget debts, or alliances. For a moment, the hum of the slip drive and the swirl of hyperspace were the only sounds. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping. You've given me something I thought I'd lost, Rhea. Hope. I know that might sound dramatic, but I want you to know how deeply I appreciate it. My pulse quickened as the space between us seemed to vanish. I'm glad, I stammered, feeling a flush creep across my cheeks. Her hand slipped across the console, finding mine, her fingers weaving between them. I felt the warmth of her skin, the faint tingle of her bioluminescence. Once we're landed somewhere safe, she whispered, maybe you can show me more Terran customs. My throat went bone dry. Sure. Like bananas? A soft laugh escaped her, and in the flickering lights, her teeth gleamed. Among other things. Though I suspect there's more to humans than fruit. I couldn't help but grin, even as my heart thundered. The tension between us was suddenly heady, ripe with possibilities that felt both thrilling and uncertain. I squeezed her hand gently. I'll be happy to give you a proper introduction to our, culinary wonders. Her eyelids lowered slightly, the swirl in her markings intensifying. I look forward to it. Our moment was interrupted by a jolt in the slip drive field. We both startled, turning back to the console. A red warning flashed. The patchwork stabilizer was straining under the jump. I wrestled with the controls, trying to keep us from dropping out of hyperspace prematurely. Zalara quickly adjusted the improvised energy modulator, channeling her species' flair for tech. The alarm died down, returning us to a shaky but stable flight. I exhaled, tension flooding out of my muscles. She let out a relieved sigh. Perhaps we'll get to that next meal sooner than we thought. I nodded, forcing a shaky laugh. But through the stress and uncertainty, I felt a rising anticipation for whatever came after we touched down. We had left behind the nightmare of that station. Ahead lay a galaxy of unknowns, danger, yes, but also the promise of new connections. When we finally exited hyperspace near a small outpost station on the edge of a trade route, the slip drive gave a final sputter and shut down. I managed to pilot us to a docking clamp, letting out a whoop of relief as we touched down in one piece. Zalara practically sagged in her seat, exhaustion etched on her face. I powered down the engines and turned to her, noticing the slight tremor in her hands. Without thinking, I gently covered them with mine. Her gaze lifted to meet mine, and that swirl of color in her eyes spoke volumes. We didn't speak for a moment, just breathed, letting the reality of our survival wash over us. Eventually, we helped the old man off the ship, heading into the outpost's med bay. The staff there, a mix of humans and a few other species, took him in without questions. In these frontier stations, folks asked fewer questions, everyone had their scars. Zalara and I lingered near the medbay doors, an awkward tension settling over us now that the immediate crisis was past. She fiddled with her data device, eyes cast downward. I wondered if she might leave right away, to bring her findings to her people. My stomach twisted at the thought of never seeing her again. A moment later, she turned to me, determination in her eyes. Rhea, I need to contact someone from my clan, someone who might help me present this evidence properly. That might take time. She swallowed. I don't want to leave you behind without saying something. My heart pounded. I'm listening. She hesitated, then stepped closer, her luminous markings warming to a deep violet. I want you to come with me, at least for now. You're part of this, whether you intended to be or not. And selfishly, She broke off, her cheeks darkening in a blush that was strangely similar to a human flush. My breath caught in my throat. Zalara, She let out a soft laugh, stepping closer still until we were nearly chest to chest. I could see each glowing line on her neck, each subtle shimmer of her hair. I've been on my own for so long, fighting for acceptance. You've seen what my people endured, and what we're still fighting for. I know you have your own path, but I'd like to walk part of it together. If you want that too. I swallowed hard, half in disbelief that she was offering this. My mind flashed back to the closeness in the corridors, the electricity of her touch, the unspoken bond forged through danger and shared purpose. Yes, I said hoarsely. I want that. She exhaled in relief, and a small, radiant smile curved her lips. Thank you? I let out a trembling breath, my hands moving almost on their own to rest on her hips. She let me, her gaze locked on mine. The swirl of color in her markings took on a sensual pulse, as though reflecting her heartbeat. A wave of heat swept through me. We stood there in that cramped outpost corridor, the distant hum of voices and machinery drifting around us. I hesitated, not sure if I was crossing a line, but the softness in her eyes urged me forward. Lowering my head, I pressed my lips to hers. Her intake of breath was sharp, and for a split second, I worried I'd misread the moment. But then her mouth softened, parting to welcome me. A low hum of pleasure resonated in her throat, vibrating against my lips. I felt the warmth of her body, the faint tingle of her bioluminescent skin, and it was dizzying. She kissed me back with tentative passion, as though exploring this human gesture for the first time. Her lips were surprisingly familiar, though the slight tips of her canines grazed my lower lip in a way that made me shiver. A swirl of violet light brightened along her arms, intensifying at each passing second. My heart raced, and I slid one hand up her back, feeling the ridges beneath her hair. We broke apart breathless, foreheads nearly touching. She let out a shaky laugh, eyes gleaming with wonder. So that's how humans share sweetness. I chuckled, a blush creeping over my cheeks. I can't speak for all humans, but that's one way. Her markings glowed in answer, and she tilted her head in invitation for another kiss. I obliged, sinking deeper into the moment, letting the chaos of our surroundings melt away. Her body pressed closer, the subtle curves of her alien form fitting against me in a way that sparked a heady rush of desire. We pulled back eventually, both of us panting softly. Around us, a few passers-by pretended not to stare. On the frontier, such displays, especially between different species, were probably more curious than scandalous. Zalara glanced around and smiled wryly, then took my hand, lacing our fingers. Come on, she murmured. We have to find a quiet place. Somewhere to rest and figure out our next step. My heart pounded as I followed her through the outpost corridors, her hand warm in mine. We passed merchants haggling over cargo, travelers refueling their ships, all the usual bustle of a fringe station. But my attention was fixed on the woman beside me, the vibrant swirl of her markings that told me she was feeling as charged as I was. We found a modest lodging bay, rented a cramped room with a single bunk. It wasn't luxurious by any stretch, just a bunk, a small table, and a fresher unit. But it was private, and that was enough. Zalara stood in the center of the room, turning to face me, her posture both confident and vulnerable. I realized my hands were shaking, adrenaline still coursing through me from the station and from the sudden, intense connection. She noticed and stepped closer, sliding her arms around my waist. Her presence enveloped me in that subtle, intoxicating scent, and I felt my heart stutter. Her voice, quiet and husky, reached me. You saved me. And I saved you. I feel like we've been bound by something deeper than a simple alliance. I stared into her luminous eyes. I can't explain it either. But I feel it. She leaned in, pressing her lips to mine again. This time, the kiss was slower, sweeter, charged with the tension of two souls who'd been running on survival mode for too long. My hands found the smooth lines of her back, fingertips grazing her glowing filaments, sending small sparks of sensation. She gasped softly into my mouth, and I deepened the kiss, losing myself in the alien taste of her. We stumbled toward the bunk, hearts pounding in tandem. She guided my hands to the fastenings of her attire, encouraging me to explore her. My breath hitched as I traced the strange patterns on her skin, a tapestry of glowing stripes and ridges. She pressed closer, her hum of approval resonating against my chest. In that cramped room, the rest of the galaxy faded. There were no war crimes, no abandoned stations, no old traumas. Just the heat of her body, the softness of her lips, the undeniable spark that flared whenever our eyes met. I let out a shuddering breath as she pulled me onto the bunk, her body half atop mine, her ridge ear brushing my cheek. Her voice trembled with a mix of shyness and resolve. Let me feel you. Let me understand how humans connect. I tried to speak, but words failed me. Instead, I let my hands roam over her luminous skin, feeling the subtle ridges and the warmth beneath. Each new discovery drew soft gasps from her, as if every touch was a revelation. She trailed her hands over my torso, exploring the differences in my form, occasionally pausing to study me with intense fascination. As the moments passed, the tension between us built like a rising tide. Her body moved against mine with mounting urgency, and her breath came in quick pants. The bunk's creaking underscored our shared heartbeat. I felt her lips against my neck, my jaw, then back to my mouth, and a jolt of longing pulsed through me. Yet amid the heady desire, there was a gentle tenderness, an emotional vulnerability that both frightened and exhilarated me. We were two exiles, forging a path in a universe that had cast us aside. For a few precious moments, we could forget the walls we built around our hearts. Our breaths mingled, and I surrendered to the rhythm of her kisses, the stroke of her skin against mine. Time stretched, lost in the quiet hum of the outpost's life support. When we finally paused, half draped across each other, sweaty and breathless, I felt a wave of contentment so profound it almost hurt. Zalara lay with her head on my chest, her markings softening to a tranquil glow. She traced lazy circles over my arm, as though memorizing every inch of me. I stroked her hair, noticing how the filaments caught the room's dim light. After a while, she spoke, voice hushed. This is a first for me. There's no going back to who I was before I met you, Rhea. My throat tightened at her confession. I feel the same, I admitted, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. I never expected any of this. She shifted, propping herself on one elbow to look at me. A gentle smile curved her lips. When we first met, I only thought you were an amusing Terran with a piece of fruit. Her expression grew serious. Now I see there's so much more, enough that I want to know every scar, every regret, every hope. I cupped her cheek, feeling her lean into my touch. Then we have time, if you'll stay. Her gaze lowered. I will. For a while at least. My people need this data, and I need to settle things with my clan. But I want to do it with you by my side, if you'll come. A spark of determination lit inside me. I'll come. I tried not to think about the logistics, about how her clan might react to a human in their midst, or whether old grudges would resurface. Right then, all I cared about was the fierce loyalty I felt toward her. She smiled, leaning down to brush a soft kiss over my lips. Then that settles it. We lapsed into a contented silence, lying there in the narrow bunk, listening to the hum of the outpost. Eventually, the reality of our next moves began to creep in. We'd have to gather supplies, figure out how to approach her clan. But for now, we let ourselves rest, tangling our limbs in a private cocoon of warmth and relief. When we finally rose, redressing in the cramped space, our eyes kept meeting in lingering glances that promised more closeness. She teased me about my hair sticking up. I teased her about the marks my stubble had left on her neck. The ease of our banter felt surreal after the horrors we'd witnessed. We left the lodging bay hand in hand. Passers-by threw curious looks our way, a human man and an alien woman with glowing markings, walking so intimately. But neither of us seemed to care. We found a small vendor selling fruit, though not bananas, unfortunately. I bought something that resembled a citrus melon from a distant colony. I offered it to Zilara with a playful grin. "Consider this your second human fruit lesson," I said. She bit into it cautiously, letting the juice trickle down her chin. A contented rumble vibrated in her throat. "Not bad," she pronounced, dabbing the juice away. "But not as sweet as a banana." I laughed, touched by the memory that had started it all. "We'll find more bananas someday." Her hand slid around my waist. "Looking forward to it." We made our way to the outpost's comm hub, renting a private booth. She uploaded her data, prepared a secured message to her clan's contact, a friend or ally who might help her. She asked for a rendezvous on a neutral planet, away from direct clan territory, where they could meet without risking immediate conflict. As she transmitted the message, she glanced at me, her expression vulnerable. "I'm not sure if they'll answer. But if they do..." I placed a hand on her shoulder in silent reassurance. The booth hummed quietly. She finished the transmission, then shut down the interface, turning to me. I could see the apprehension in her eyes, the weight of everything that might happen next. Before she could speak, I pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, then her lips. Her tension eased, and she leaned into me. "No matter what comes," I said softly, "you're not alone." Her eyes glistened. "Neither are you." We left the booth and strolled the outpost corridors for a while, waiting. The plan was to check back in a few hours for a response. The old man we rescued was stable in the med bay, likely unconscious for days to recover from his ordeal, but safe. My ship was in dire need of repairs beyond the stabilizer patch. We'd need a more reliable vessel if we planned to travel to her clan's rendezvous. Eventually, we found ourselves in a corner of the outpost's mess hall, sitting across from each other at a metal table. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, and the smell of recycled air thickened with the scent of cheap ale and stew. Zilara watched me with a curious expression, her head tilting slightly. I tried to read her emotions in the shifting lights of her markings. "Something on your mind?" She smiled faintly. "I was just recalling how I once asked if your banana was a Terran mating ritual." I snorted with laughter, earning a curious glance from a few other patrons. "Yeah, that was a unique introduction." Her grin widened. "It was. But maybe not so far off, considering where we ended up." A warmth spread in my chest. I reached for her hand across the table. She squeezed mine back, the glow of her markings intensifying in gentle pulses. We didn't need words to acknowledge how far we'd come in such a short time. An outpost announcement blared overhead, calling for a cargo crew. We stayed silent, letting the bustle of strangers pass by. For a long while, we just sat there, locked in each other's presence, each grappling with the swirl of emotions that had taken root. Eventually, we rose and made our way back to the comm hub. The message light blinked, indicating a reply. Zilara exhaled sharply, nerves etched in every line of her posture. She opened the message. A brief text scrolled across the screen in her language. I couldn't read it, but I watched her expression closely. Relief, then apprehension. "They agreed to meet," she murmured, her voice tight. "They'll send a small delegation to Valaris for neutral ground." "Sounds like a good sign," I offered, though I didn't fully understand her clan's politics. She nodded, turning to me. "We have to go there if we're to present this data. They might still see you as an outsider. But if they see what we found in that station..." I placed a hand on her shoulder, giving a reassuring squeeze. "We'll handle it together." She leaned into the touch. "All right then. Let's try to secure a better ship. This might be a one-way trip if they react badly. But I have to try." My gut clenched at the thought of stepping into alien territory, trusting that they wouldn't throw me into a cell. But I pushed the worry aside, focusing on Zilara's determined face. "I'm with you." We spent the next couple of days haggling with outpost merchants, selling some of the salvage from the station for a decent price. Zalara's skill at bargaining in multiple languages was impressive, and it made me realize she was far more worldly than I'd initially assumed. In the evenings, we returned to the small room we'd rented. Most nights, we fell into each other's arms, exploring the fragile connection that had blossomed between us. It was more than physical desire, though that burned hot enough to leave me breathless. It was the steadying presence of someone who understood solitude and longing. Each time we pressed our bodies together, it felt like a reclamation of hope. On the third day, we found a refurbished courier ship for sale. It wasn't fancy, but it had a reliable engine and a slip drive that wouldn't fall apart mid-jump. We pooled our credits. Zalara sold a few non-critical pieces of her own gear. I traded in my old ship for scrap. Finally, we had enough to buy the courier. Standing on the docking ramp of our newly acquired ship, I felt a mixture of sadness and anticipation. My old vessel had been a piece of junk, but it was mine. Now, everything was changing. Zalara stepped beside me, placing a hand on my back. "Thank you for doing this. I know it's a leap of faith." I turned to her, letting myself brush a stray filament from her face. "Let's just say that banana was the best investment I ever made." She laughed, a sound full of warmth. In that moment, I saw the woman she could be away from war and exile, playful, strong, and deeply caring. "Shall we go?" I nodded. Together, we boarded the courier, stowed our gear, and fired up the engines. As we lifted off, I watched the outpost fall away behind us, a cluster of blinking lights in the vacuum of space. The old man we'd rescued decided to remain on the outpost for further medical care and the chance to find a new life of his own. We left him behind with instructions to contact us if he ever needed help. Zalara guided the ship out of orbit with a steady hand. I manned the NAV console, plotting a course for Valaris 4. My heart pounded at the thought of meeting her clan, of presenting them with the data that exposed Terran atrocities. But if it helped her find closure, and gave her a chance to reclaim her place on her own terms, I'd stand by her side. Once we were set on the route, she engaged the slip drive. The ship hummed with power, smoothly entering the shimmering corridor of hyperspace. We shared a glance, an unspoken promise passing between us. Then she reached for my hand, lacing her fingers with mine. "Whatever happens down there, I'm glad you're here." I squeezed back, marveling at how much had changed since the day she caught me devouring that banana in a dusty corridor. "Me too, Zalara." "Me too." And so we set off into the unknown, bound by a fragile trust and a passion that refused to be denied. The future loomed vast and uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt the stirrings of hope burning bright in my chest, hope that we'd find a place to belong, together.